Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and another win for the so-called trade war, if you want to call it that. I guess I'm being a little sarcastic here because, as this Business Insider article says, GM will stop building cars at 3 North American factories and cut its salaried workforce by 15% in 2019 as it shifts to electric and self-driving cars. And as the article goes into, General Motors announced on Monday that it would stop building vehicles at 3 factories in North America in 2019. According to the automaker, the Oshawa Assembly in Oshawa, Ontario, Canada, the Detroit Hamtramck Assembly in Michigan, and the Lordstown Assembly in Warren, Ohio, each will be deallocated by the end of 2019 as GM reorganizes its manufacturing capacity to focus on electric and self-driving vehicles and prepares for a downturn in the auto market for a weakening on the U.S. economy. Each factory is either entirely or mostly devoted to passenger car production, and those vehicles have seen a collapse in consumer demand amid a shift to crossover SUVs and pickup trucks. Lordstown, in particular, builds a single slow-selling sedan, the Chevy Cruze, as has been operating on just a single shift. But it's also located in a state that Donald Trump won in 2016, so GM could draw the ire of a president who needs hiring in the Midwest to bolster his re-election prospects in 2020. The vehicles being assembled at the 3 factories will all phase out next year. GM did not announce plans to replace them with new models. In a conference call with reporters to announce the moves, CEO Mary Barra said that idling the plants would ensure that GM remains agile, resistant, and profitable. She added that the largest U.S. automaker is taking these actions now while the company and economy are strong to stay ahead of fast-changing industry and market conditions. And these factories employ thousands of workers. I want to mention, first of all, and it's something that people aren't going to like, but the market is always right in the sense that, you know, if there's this new innovation on the market that is, self-driving cars, which per capita kills less people than people driving cars, as scary as self-driving cars might sound, the market is going to go in that direction and jobs will go with it. Of course, a bunch of jobs will be lost, but more jobs will be created, as history has shown over time, especially with the automation going from the 90s, where 20 years ago, 50% of the jobs that exist today could not have been thought of. And I've gone over this automation thing before. If jobs are technologically useless, and I hate to be that harsh, but if they are technologically useless and there's better ways to do it at a cheaper cost and, compete in the market, that's a good thing. But on top of that, then there's market restrictions like these trade wars that restrict markets on both sides, and eventually they're attacks, they inflate the price, and it affects people the most. And I find it really annoying to watch these trade wars heat up these markets to the point where they're restricting individual demand and forcing, in a lot of cases, companies to either go under or, gain a massive ground against any competition. I think it's unfair. I think the market should decide, and individuals therefore should decide on the market. John, what do you think about all this as, they blame Doug Ford and all that kind of stuff for what's happening, for example, in Oshawa, Ontario?
Well, Josh, what you're seeing, first of all, you were talking about the problems with what's happening in the auto industry. There is a big thing there that was talking about the sales of trucks and crossovers, SUVs, because gasoline is cheaper. Everybody's loading up on big cars again and are loading up on mass amounts of debt. That's what they're forgetting about this whole thing. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, Josh, but I actually found some perfect measurements here that I'm going to go back to as you go through a little bit again here. But I found a comparison of where I could compare any car here. So I'm going to go back to that in a bit. But, this is has nothing really to do with who actually has a little bit to do with that the U.S. cut their corporate taxes. Of course, it's they want to go in there and it's cheaper labor and everything because we live in a global environment. That's why everybody moved their manufacturing from the U.S. to China, or now it's elsewhere, mostly where everything gets manufactured because it's cheaper. So of course corporations will try to find the cheapest amount of way to produce a car because of inflation, and the monetary system is forcing them to put out a cheaper product, and they gotta try to make more profits for their shareholders. So they are in a double whammy as well because of the whole monetary system stuff.
Whammy.
Yeah, so it's definitely like we're getting hit on all sides here from this. There's so many other aspects to it that they're not talking about in the article there, and of course they said like Doug Ford has not done enough. Well, how about just cutting taxes massively all across the board? Then oh wait, you probably can't do that because you can't pay the mass amounts of debt that Ontario has accumulated.
Well, yeah, and of course, Ontario's debt is worse than California's, which says a lot. And of course, most of the taxes go towards, paying off the interest on the debt, on the fraudulent creation of fiat currencies. It's absolute nonsense. But I do want to mention that, with these trade wars and everything that goes on, there's also the concern about bailouts in the long term, as we've seen before, which again, is just government manipulation via the stolen funds of the populace. Absolutely wrong. And on top of that, we have to also look at, electric cars. I think there's a lot of great efficiency in it. Mostly I prefer, biofuels, as in, let's look at hemp, and even water can power cars, has historically been found, but it's not profitable for certain government monopolies. I have to ask though, where is this electricity being generated that is charging these electric cars? And a lot of people completely miss that point entirely. This electricity doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's generated, and often through coal plants, which are worse for the planet than fossil fuels, and often through these huge ethanol plants and everything. I find it always goes back to the same old stuff under the virtue signaling massive corporations and governments around the world pushing their climate agenda and all that kind of stuff. But John, as we kind of go back to you for a moment to look at what you're looking at right now and slowly close it off, I want to ask, what does this look like long term for these big auto manufacturers? Are they sustainable at all in the current market?
Well, that's the biggest problem here is the actual sustainability of any of this auto manufacturing in the way we have it today. You're looking at the big issues here, Josh, is there's so much problems in the global economy, and with the auto manufacturers continuously creating a lesser and lesser car that works better. They're disposable now after after you driven them for 10 years, a lot of people. So
in a lot of cases they're disposable after you've driven them for 2 years and you haven't even finished paying for the financing.
No, yeah, a lot of people do that because the prices drop tremendously after 100,000 kilometers. So you get a huge price drop, so people want to get into a new car right away, and this is on purpose, of course, by the car manufacturers and by the financing institutions that are behind auto lending. That is, mostly a lot of them are working hand in hand together with
auto-backed securities and stuff.
Yeah, and then they have they finance these loans. Then it's TD, Scotia here in Canada, a whole bunch of whatever others, but that's the major ones. And then they take those, they tranche them, they put them into auto-backed securities, ABSs, and then they ship them off to pension funds and everywhere else, most likely, where they AAA rate them, but that's what they do. So, but what you're seeing is the auto sales for example, Ford Fiestas in the United States, just to make an example here, the sales are minimal. They're under 100,000. They're about 50,000 ish. And you see the Ford F series of trucks, they sell for, like, you have a 900,000 sales of that truck. So you're clearly seeing that, and it's been...
I have one of them.
Yeah, but what's interesting, Josh, if you take a look at this chart here, it's not so much a compact car, but it's actually the car sales shows you the slump in 2008, and we're up at a high again. We were just above this back in 2001. And then it's stopped there. We saw that it hit about 900,000, so kind of hits a roof around 900,000. But you see the cycles with of course the gas prices were really high. So you see a tremendous amount of people moving forth and back between Smaller cars, they'll get into those. They'll default on their loans. They'll get into a smaller car when the gas prices goes very high, and so on. So it's just shows you how people really are desperate to well, I think no. The real thing, Josh, is that what you're looking at is the mass amounts of like auto sales has to be kept up because you have a debt market there as well. And when that debt market collapses, when there's not any more people to in debt to buy cars, then there's a problem. What you saw with the auto lending, for example, like think about back in the day, there was like 2 or 3 years. Now you're looking at up to 8 and even 10 years some places. And then you have car title loans coming on top of that because people can't afford to have a real car, like a new car. They take out a car title loan to actually get money out of their car. That is a depreciating asset. So there's a lot of things with the auto system that's really flawed on top of everything else that we're talking about. There's a lot more to it than just saying that auto, like Ontario and Doug Ford hasn't done enough to keep.
And this has been adding up for a long time. Yeah, I mean, before Doug Ford was in office, John.
Yeah, you gotta understand, Josh, that the government actually like putting out and giving a whole bunch of tax breaks to corporations in order to get them over there. Look at what for example what Amazon just recently did, where they went out to everybody and said that we might consider everyone to become the headquarter. Then everybody gave up their information, their private data that they had to Amazon. So Amazon suddenly sat on a huge data set of what they could use to further go in and take over the country. It's pretty hilarious how they play that.
What I was trying to get at there was that it's interesting that everyone blames Doug Ford when we've been talking about the auto bubble, for example, for a couple years now. Before Doug Ford was in office, I mean, everyone wants to blame the current puppet. And I'm sorry, but it's always that way. These guys don't really have any power. It always usually rests on the people behind the scenes. And not to mention, there's a lot of market manipulators out there, a lot of people that thrive off of debt, whether it be the banks or the government. Either way, it means dependency to them. And oh man, I can't wait for, and I say this facetiously, I can't wait for Michael Moore to be out there with a camera again talking about GM and everything. And then when remember that movie Roger and Me years ago, one of Michael Moore's first movies, very annoying. And then he actually did end up getting an interview with Roger, but he ended up deleting it from the final movie and pretending he couldn't get to him and all that kind of stuff, because the fact is he always asks for government to stop the problems of government and markets to be manipulated, which causes the problem in the first place. And in the end, we just end up in a perpetual circle, and we need to allow the market to thrive, the market to decide, and therefore the individual to decide. It's not greedy for individuals to decide their own fate on the market. What is greedy is stealing people's money, redistributing it, and putting it into things that you think are a good idea against other people's will, by force, by robbery, by theft. So anyway, there's a lot that we could go into with this whole subject matter, John. But as we close it off, what's your bottom line?
Well, it would be bad for the Ontario economy, of course. It's going to take a huge hit, especially for the tax income coming in to the government. There's not going to be as much taxes coming in to the government, of course. And we got to feel for everybody that's involved here. There's people on the streets because of this, and then they're going to suffer because of this. But Ontario has to get out of the way. Like, that's the problem with every government today. They think that they have to do something to keep an industry there. It was interesting. I actually was going out to a Manitoba Forward meeting here, which is a organization, like political organization, trying to see what the government can do for businesses. And it was funny. I met with some higher up IT people that actually now they are in San Francisco and other places, because what they said is the government, why can't the government just get out of the way? We don't need the government to get there, but the problem is there's too much government. That's what, came forward here, and that's the problem.
There is
with
government,
everything.
period. That is a problem. And I want to also mention that, I feel terrible for the people on the street, but that comes down to what we are talking about all the time here at WHAM, is financial responsibility and self-sustainability. And it's a problem where people are used and abused and stolen from and pushed into these pigeonholes and told to depend on other people for their finances. And then they're put in this situation where this market, which isn't as innovative anymore when it comes down to man labor, and it's more efficient with machine labor, which creates more jobs down the road than it actually replaces or takes away. But nonetheless, these people are kind of stuck in this situation where they never expected that to happen. They are losing a ton of money right around Christmas. It always seems to be all around Christmas that these things happen. It's terrible. And it just means that we need to teach more people about financial responsibility, saving themselves, saving their wealth, being self-sustainable, independent, financially responsible. For responsibility and freedom play hand in hand, folks, and looking at things like gold and silver as wealth insurance and cryptocurrencies that are truly decentralized with true fundamental value. Do your own due diligence can truly help a lot of people. The blockchain infrastructure that's truly decentralized can change a lot of things. I mean, there's so many ways. And then, of course, just responsibility and self-sustainable are number one.
Yeah, and then just one last thing before we go here, Josh. People has to, as we say, they have to be financially responsible and understand that in today's workplace, having a job for 30 years, that's usually insane. So we gotta be understandable and start up your own businesses on the side when you get hit. Like, have that and study business, study money and economics, and be more self-reliant, so you don't have to depend on these huge conglomerates to keep you employed.
Yeah, and cash flow. And of course, I know it's a little difficult these days with government intrusion and, interference and coercion when it comes to starting a business. And that's a whole other issue completely, which is why that people need to stand up to these two organized crime rackets we call banks and government. But of course, that's a story for another day, as we always talk about here at WHAM. Anyway, thanks for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth. Be the change. Like what you see here at WHAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized and censored on YouTube, as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. Also, check out our Bitcoin address below, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out at steemit.com. We're at Josh Sigurdson. It's a future of social media where you get paid in the upvote of your post in cryptocurrency. Steem, that is. So make sure to check us out there. Make sure to join us at Anarchapulco 2019 with people like Ron Paul, G. Edward Griffin, of course, Jeff Berwick, Vid Jedlicka. So many incredible speakers are going to be speaking. It's just a massively growing event. It is something you have to see to believe. So make sure to check it out below and save money on your tickets by using promo code WHAM, that's WAM, and I hope to see you there. Also, check out our newsletter as we are getting demonetized and censored and all that. We don't know what comes next, so we have an email, worldalternativemedia@gmail.com. Send us an email with subject line YES, YES, and we will include you in the newsletter, where we will continuously keep you updated. So until next time, thanks for watching, everyone. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.